Hi guys. So today in this demo, I'm going to be talking about some animation principles and we'll be applying them to type like this. So to get started, start your project like you should always start your project by making your file structure. And now make your first composition and name it with our naming convention. It should be 1920 by 1080 with a frame rate of 30 frames per second and a duration of 2 seconds. Okay, so now that I have that, you can either copy and paste this to get our first pre-comp, or you can make a new composition the same way that we just did. So I'm going to name this one Squash and Stretch. And all of these should be the same too. So 1920 by 1080, 30, 2 seconds. So make sure you have Squash and Stretch open and type out your first text later. It can say whatever you want. I'm just going to use Squash and Stretch. Great. I'm going to align it to the center of my composition using the Align panel. And we need all of these words to be on separate layers. So one way to do that is to use this as sort of a guide layer and to copy and paste 3 times and just reduce each word down to a layer on its own and align it. Okay, so you can do it that way, or if you looked at the plugins I posted in Slack, you can use Text Exploder, which cuts out a lot of time. So I'm going to delete those, change it back to the color that I want, go to Window, Text Exploder, and I want it split into words. I want to delete the original, and fine, top to bottom's okay. Select your layer and click Apply. And now each one of these is on its own layer. So I'm going to hide these last two and just focus on Squash for now. I'm going to twirl down to get the position and scale parameters. I'm going to make a keyframe at the beginning of my timeline. Now I'm going to go forward to 22 frames and make another keyframe on both parameters. And I'm going to go to 1 second and do the same thing. So now I want the position, I want this word to sort of fall in from the top. So I'm just going to subtract 700 from this to get it to go off screen. Oops, and see that since I had all of these keyframes selected, it applied that to all of them. So I want this one actually, I'm just going to undo and make sure I only have this one. And now I'm going to subtract 700. And I want this one to sort of overshoot the middle position. So I'm just going to add 100. Actually, I'm going to add 200. So you can see it sort of drops in and bounces and then settles into place. Now I want to adjust the scale. Make sure you unhook the constraint proportions here. And I want it to be really tall in the beginning, so I'm going to make the Y parameter 200. And you can see it sort of got bigger. So 200. And then when it lands, I want it to be squashed. So I'm gonna make it 50, and then I want it to be at 100% when it lands. So when I play, you can see that it sort of does this weird slow movement because my keyframes aren't eased yet, so everything's just going at the same speed. So I'm going to select my keyframes, go down to my keyframe assistant and hit easy ease, and then switch to my graph editor. And so I want it to sort of be slow in the beginning, and then when it hits, I want it to be sort of a harder hit, but I don't want it to be really hard, so I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to leave it where it was. And then I want it, after it does the hard hit, I want it to sort of ease into place. So now when I play, you can see that it sort of snaps once it hits the bottom. But just to make this look a little bit more natural, I'm going to take the scale parameter and move it forward, all of the keyframes forward 2 frames, so it's offset a little bit. So you can see that it sort of adjusts into place after the word lands. Great. So now I'm just going to do the same thing to the and the stretch. Okay, so this is what I have now. And now I'm just gonna move these forward 5 frames so they're not all coming in at the same time. They sort of plop in one by one. Great, so that's the first pre-comp. Okay, so now I'm gonna make my second pre-comp, and this one is gonna be match on action. With that opened, I'm gonna type out the words. And these ones I don't need to be aligned, so I'm just gonna align each one to the center. I'm gonna hide these 2, so I'm just focusing on match. And now, so I need this anchor point to be in the middle of the word, because when I scale it up, I don't want it scaling from the bottom, I want it scaling from the center. So I'm gonna use my pan behind tool up here, click the anchor point, and hold down Command, and it'll snap to the middle. So now I'm gonna make a keyframe at the beginning of the timeline, and then another one at 15 frames. And I want it to get 275% bigger. And I want this layer to end right at this keyframe, so I can drag this from here, or with this layer selected, you can hit Option bracket, and it'll Option closed bracket, and it'll bring it to the playhead. So that's what I have now. And now I need to adjust my easing. So I want it to, easy ease is fine for now, but I'm just gonna pull this all the way over, and then I want it to be really steep. So when it disappears, it sort of pops off. And I'm gonna move my on to where this one ends. And you can either move it by hand, or you can hit beginning bracket and it'll move the layer to where your playhead is. And so now I want this motion to be the opposite. So I have to move my anchor point again. And I'm going to twirl down my transform properties to scale. Move forward 15 frames, put another keyframe, and go back to the one at frame 15 and make it 275. So now it sort of pops on. I'm gonna ease my keyframes again, but I want these to be the opposite of what these ones are. So now this is what it looks like. And just to make these a little bit more different, I'm gonna add a background layer so the color is different when it says on. So I'm gonna go to layer, new, solid. I want it to be white, so the opposite. I'm gonna move my layer, and I'm gonna change this to black. So now when it pops, it's sort of flashier. And so I'm gonna twirl down my transform properties again, because now to get into the last word, action, I want it to move up. So I'm gonna make a keyframe on position, go forward 15 frames, make another keyframe, and move it off screen. And I'm gonna ease these keyframes now the same way I eased these keyframes. So with the graph looking like this. And so now I want these layers to end at this keyframe. So I'm just gonna move them there. And now action can come on. And I just want it to do the opposite motion of this. But so coming from the bottom into place. So my transform properties, position, go to the end of the timeline, add a keyframe, go back to the beginning, move it off to the bottom, and then ease these keyframes with the opposite graph as the other one. And move it to the end of the timeline. So now this is what it looks like. So match on action you can use a lot of ways. I have an example from a project that I did from the Women in Film video that I showed you guys. Right here.
Actor, Best Director, Best TV Series. Hollywood, what if we consider this? For every 4 men behind the scenes of a film, there's only Best TV Series. Hollywood, what if we consider this? For every 4 men behind the scenes of a film, there's only 1 woman. Or that scripts are written.
I use match on action a lot. It's really helpful to get this one down. Okay, so the next one is gonna be follow through. So I just need a type layer. Things don't have to be placed. I'm just gonna use the whole word. That's not how you spell through. Through? I think that's right. Sorry, I can't spell. So for this one, I'm just gonna adjust the position. I'm gonna make a keyframe here. I'm gonna go forward 25 frames, make another keyframe, and then forward another 25 and make another keyframe. So here I want it to be off to the left. Oops. Here it's in the middle, and here it will be in the right. And when I play it, you can see that it doesn't really pause in the middle, which I want it to do. So I'm gonna ease these keyframes to get it so it slows down in the middle. So now when I play it, this is what it looks like. I'm actually gonna make it so there's a little bit more of a pause. So it fully stops and doesn't keep moving. Now, just to exaggerate this motion a little bit, I'm going to skew the words so they look like they're getting blown in the wind. And to do that, I'm going to click in my type layer next to text. There's this little animate arrow, and I'm going to animate skew. And that'll bring this up. And so I just want to skew the axis. No, sorry. I'm just going to hit a keyframe next to skew at the same places where my position keyframes are. So in the beginning, I want it to be pushed back. So I'm going to make this -30. So it looks like that. And then 0. And then here, I want it to go from 0 to -30. And move it all the way to the end. And actually, I'm hitting U to get up my used keyframes. This needs to get further over so it gets completely off. Now, that's a little better, but I'm going to ease these keyframes just so they match the same easing as the position. And so since the easing's the same now, it's kind of hard to see the movement. It's really subtle, so I'm just going to offset the skew by 5 keyframes, so it takes a little bit longer for it to fall into place. And that's pretty much it, but there's another way to do the skew with something called a type animator, which this is already, but there's a different way to do it. So I'm just going to make this -30, not -300, -30. And instead of keyframing this part, I'm going to twirl this menu down and keyframe offset. So before I start, actually, I'm going to go down to my advanced settings and change this from characters to words and shape from square to ramp down. So now I'm going to make this -100, go forward, make another keyframe, and one at the end. Oops, so now I'm going to go back to the beginning, and from -100, I'm going to move this up to 100. So now you can see that it's the same movement, but it's affecting it word by word. So I'm going to do the same thing at the end. So it's going from 100 to -100. -100 to 100. So this is what it looks like, which looks kind of funny because, again, my keyframes aren't eased, which I'm going to do now. Make sure that one's aligned with the end, and I'm going to offset them again by 5. So now this is what it looks like. And so words is fine, but here is what's nice about this. I can change it to characters. So now it's still a little bit hard to see, but each character is falling into place separately rather than the whole line together. And this becomes more like you can see it better on different things. So I'm going to hide this and just show you really quickly how type animators work as opposed to just animating the transform properties. So I'm just going to say hello and adjust this to the center. And so I could animate position this way, but I'm going to twirl that up and next to text click animate position and set it to 100, actually negative 200. Sorry, 200. And then I'm going to go into my range selector, twirl down in advanced, change it to characters, change it to ramp up. In offset now, I'm going to move this to negative 100, make a keyframe, and go forward 20 frames and change it to 100. So now you can see that each letter is animating in on its own. And I'm going to ease these keyframes, just ease in. And so now that's what it looks like. You can also, you don't have to ease it that way. I think this way is confusing because it has different names and for some reason it doesn't stick in my brain, but you can ease the keyframes that way by just changing the ease high and the ease low. So what's nice about this is if I wanted to change the word to say like my name, the animation stays the same without me having to redo it. Which comes in handy when you're making something like a template for a client or even just working on a project and something changes. You won't have to redo everything. You can also, so in this Animator 1, if I wanted to add another property, I could change this to like 45 degrees. And so now these sort of twirl in with the same, without having to make any other keyframes. And you can adjust it to like words. So now the whole word will just come in, or lines if you have more than one line. Now it does it line by line, which this comes in handy. They are sort of restrictive because if I wanted this to overshoot, for example, so I'm going to get rid of the rotation. And if I wanted just this position to go up, so like go up and shoot past its position and then fall into place like we did in the squash and stretch where it overshoots, you can't do that. So using the offset part, which is the one that affects characters, which is sort of annoying. It also is sort of difficult to think about animating this way sometimes when you're used to just using the normal transform properties. So you can use it if you want to, but it's not required. So that's follow through and a little explanation of type animators. I've used follow through before on a project. The most recent was for this wonderful show on MTV called Revenge Prank. I did the open and some of the internal graphics for it, and I'm just gonna play it really quickly. It's kind of fast, so
bro. Yeah,
you can see
Revenge Prank
when Revenge flies in and when the logo flies in.
In this episode,
It sort of does the same thing that we just did.
Revenge Pranks Ever.
And that's Revenge Prank. Okay, so the next one is Anticipation. If I spelled it wrong, sorry. so this one, I want this type to be on a path. I want it to be circular. So with this layer selected, I'm going to use my ellipse tool, but first actually I'm going to make some guides. You can get up your rulers by hitting Command R on your keyboard. And I just pulled up the title action safe grid, which is used in broadcast design. So this outer box is action safe, and so on different TVs, anything outside of this box might get cut off. And then this inside box is title safe, which usually you have to keep type within this middle box. Not always, because technology has come a long way from when this was invented, and it's usually pretty good, but also you never know. So generally you have to keep type within this title safe box, but it has these crosshairs that go in the middle, which I'm going to use to line up my guides. And so once I have those lined up, I'm going to get rid of the grid, and I'm going to go to View, Lock Guides, because I don't want them to move. And now with my layer selected, I'm going to use my ellipse tool, and holding Shift and Command to get it to snap to the center, I'm going to make a path. Or a mask, I mean. And so now I don't want the word to be masked. I want the word to go around this. So I'm going to twirl down text, and in path options, where it says path, I'm going to move it to mask. And now I want it to be on the outside, so I'm going to reverse path. I'm going to change my text size a little bit, so it's just a little bit smaller. Great. And so this one we're going to do the animation on the first margin. So I'm going to make a keyframe, and sort of, I want it to be a little bit past the middle. And I'm going to go forward 25 frames, make another keyframe, and have it get pulled back to like here. So this is the first move. It goes from here, gets pulled back, and now at 2 seconds, I want it to spring forward, and I want it to rotate twice. So I'm going to pull this. So that's one rotation, and I'm going to keep going. And that's 2 rotations. And just as a marker, this is where this is. So when it ends, I want that end to be in the same spot. So now when I play it, this is what it looks like. And now I'm going to adjust my easing so it looks like the word is getting pulled back. So to do that, I want it to be sort of slow. So it goes a little bit, it's fine to be fast here. I'm actually going to pull this over to like 60. So this first part, this is what it looks like, which is kind of too fast, but I only have 2 seconds, so I'm not gonna play around with it too much. And now I want it to go really fast once this word getting pulled back is let go. So that's what it looks like. Now it's sort of like getting pulled back and then springs when it's let go. And that's anticipation, which is used to show like coming action of a word in this case, or an object in other cases, or character in traditional animation. So that's that. That one was really easy. And now I have all 4 of my pre-comps, and I'm going to go to my main comp, select them and bring them in, scale them all by 50%. You don't have to do this, but just so you can see them all at the same time, and align them like we did in the first demo. And there you go. Okay, so now that we have all of our comps in our main render comp, I am going to render. So remember, add to media encoder queue, which might take a minute to pop up, but it will pop up. And then it's H.264, match source, high bit rate, and then wherever you want to save it. So I'm just gonna make sure this is going to my desktop. And I'm gonna hit play and it should render. It might take a minute to connect to the dynamic link server, but it should eventually go, or if it doesn't, then you can just render from After Effects and then pull into here and compress it that way. And now I'm gonna add an extra step because I'm done with this project and I won't be going back to it, so I'm gonna archive it for myself. And to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is with my main comps folder selected. So this has everything that I need in it because this is my main project comp. So with this comp selected, I'm going to composition, just kidding, file, dependencies, remove, or reduce project, sorry. So this will get rid of all of the extra folders, comps, solids, anything that I'm not using in my main project comp to keep my file size down as small as possible. So I'm going to click reduce project, and it said one item was deleted, which was my assets folder, which I didn't use. So I'm going to click OK, and great. So now my project is reduced down. Now I'm going to go to file, dependencies, collect files. I'm going to save this project, which you should have done at the beginning. So I'm going to use our thing. Save it, and now this will pop up, and I just want to make sure. Actually, I'm just going to do none for project only. So this will collect all of the things in your project and put it into one folder. So let's say you imported a bunch of shape layers or things from Illustrator and you have them all in your assets folder, and so this will move those files. They'll make a copy of those files and move them to a folder with your After Effects project, and in the project it'll be linked to those copies of the files in the same folder. So let's say we are doing personal archiving and you move those files, the original files, away into a different folder, and then you have to go back into this project to change something really quickly, and when you open it up, all your links are missing because you moved those original files. This will stop that. So if you collect your file, it's pulling them from that same folder. So you shouldn't have any missing links. So collect, folder, save. And so now I have my project as a different one than the original one, and it makes this report and says everything that it collected with there. And so when we working, this is how we deliver After Effects projects to clients so that they have everything that they need to edit the project if they need to. And that's how you collect a project.